New reports show that the Prime Minister is set to replace Canada's first female finance minister with his old boys network pal, Carbon Tax Carney. And Canadians are on the bus watching in terror as the Prime Minister is yanking her out of the driver's seat so that Carney can send us smashing through the guardrail and over the cliff.
A lot of craziness happening in Canada. I mean, you have Canadian politicians, municipal, or I guess in this case provincial, that are threatening to cut off the power, quite literally, for American politicians. So yeah, that's kind of crazy. I don't necessarily agree with that, but at the same time, what other choices do we have? I mean, Trump said that he's going to put on 25% tariffs, so Canada is, for lack of better words, clapping back. So we're taking a look at that. We're taking a look at a whole bunch of other clips as well, along with today's question period highlights. Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another video, everybody. Before we get into it, I do want to encourage you all to hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. It does really help grow the channel. And without further ado, let's get into this video.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. It's great to be here with the Minister of Public Safety and Emergency Services, Mike Ellis, Chief Bob Andrews from the Alberta Sheriffs, and Angela Kemp from the Alberta Law Enforcement Response Team, or ALERT, to discuss security at the Canada-US border. Today, Alberta's government is taking immediate action to crack down on illegal activities at our shared Alberta-US border, namely illegal migrants and the trafficking of drugs and guns. This suite of measures will curb illegal border activities and strengthen our nation's border security. We're investing $29 million to create a new unit, the Interdiction Patrol Team, or IPT, under the command of the Alberta Sheriffs. This unit will be supported by over 50 specially trained sheriffs. 4 drug patrol dogs, critical to ensure reasonable suspicion to search vehicles. 10 cold weather surveillance drones that can operate in high winds with dedicated pilots. And 4 narcotics analyzers to test for illicit drugs. The IPT will be made up of 7 teams of sheriffs. We will also create a 2-kilometer deep border zone, which is a red zone deemed critical infrastructure to enable the sheriffs to arrest individuals found attempting to cross the border illegally or attempting to traffic illegal drugs or weapons without needing a warrant. The criminals behind these activities destroy lives on both sides of the border, and these measures are our way of stopping it. It doesn't mean that Alberta intends or wants to act alone when it comes to securing the border. We'll obviously keep working closely with our federal counterparts at the Canada Border Services Agency, as well as the RCMP. We will start filling the ranks of the border teams as soon as possible. Our goal is to have the Interdiction Patrol Unit up and running by early next year. Together with federal law enforcement, we'll ensure that our section of the American border is well protected. We'll deny safe haven to criminals looking to operate in both countries. And if we succeed and maintain proper border security, I expect we will have a very strong relationship with the United States, as we always have.
I mean, something needs to happen. I think that the relations with Canada and America are extremely, extremely fragile right now. And it doesn't help that Danielle Smith, so I know she's not the West, but let's just call her the West Coast Premier, right? The Western Canada Premier is saying, let's work with America. Let's get things done. And we're going to take a look in a few moments at the east side. I know it's not the East Coast, but Ontario Premier is saying, we're going to fight back and we're going to cut off power. 2 extremely different approaches. I think what Canadians want, I obviously can't speak for everybody, certainly not everybody watching, certainly not all Canadians, but I think that people just want peaceful relations, and we're tired of the drama. We're tired of the warmongering. We're tired of the fear-mongering. We're tired of relations not working with our neighbors, with our friends. Like, come on, man. That's craziness. That's craziness what's going on. Nobody wants this. And then that was yesterday, yesterday, I believe that's what that interview was. Let's take a look now at another online interview that Danielle Smith did with Primetime Politics.
I want to begin with your conversation that you had with the South Dakota Governor, Kristi Noem, who also happens to be Donald Trump's pick for Homeland Security in the United States. I'm wondering what she had to say to you regarding the concerns raised by Mr. Trump on fentanyl and migrants along our shared border.
Well, I wanted to proactively raise that with her, that we have heard loud and clear that the president is concerned about both borders. And in Alberta, we know that one of the main concerns is the cross-border trafficking of drugs, particularly deadly fentanyl. We've been having a crisis in Alberta of opioid addiction and overdose for a number of years. And I think we jointly benefit from being able to stop organized crime and to be able to stop that flow of drugs. And we're prepared to do our part in Alberta.
Prepared to do your part. What does that actually mean?
What we have been looking at is how we might be able to use our sheriffs and some of the technologies that we developed in forest firefighting. We've been using night vision helicopters and drones with infrared capability as a ability to, we think, be able to monitor that border, hopefully working in conjunction with the Canadian Border Services as well as the RCMP, and we've indicated to the federal government that we're prepared to integrate our resources with their national plan. And barring that, we want to get at least started with our cross-border friends in Montana.
Yeah, no, I think that's the right approach. And when you're taking a look at contrast and comparison between Danielle Smith and what's going on with Ontario Premier, it is wildly different approaches, which is what we're going to take a look at right now. We're going to take a look at a series of videos here, and just bear with me because this gets kind of crazy. Here, starting off with this one.
For more than 90 minutes, Canada's political leaders met to discuss and strategize what to do about the looming Trump tariffs.
This is a serious moment for Canada, and we are resolute and determined to meet that moment.
Ever since U.S. President-elect Donald Trump announced a 25% tariff on Canadian goods, leaders of all political stripes have been lobbying their American counterparts, urging them to push back on the plan.
How you doing, everyone?
Today's meeting, though, went much further, with Ontario Premier Doug Ford saying he's prepared to stop exporting electricity to the States if necessary.
We will go to the full extent, depending on how far this goes. We will go to the extent of cutting off their energy, going down to Michigan, going down to New York State, and over to Wisconsin. I don't want this to happen.
Both the provinces and the federal government are compiling lists of goods that could be slapped with retaliatory tariffs if Trump follows through with his tariff threat.
Some premiers proactively identified products that their provinces produce and export to the United States, and which the U.S. relies on, and which should be considered as part of the Canadian response.
Canada has promised more border security spending to address Trump's concerns that illegal migrants and drugs are crossing from Canada into the U.S. While the federal government stresses those numbers are small, a plan is being finalized with the provinces agreeing to pitch in.
We shared details of the border plan with premiers and received positive feedback.
That plan is expected to be finalized and presented to the Trump team by the end of the year.
Hey, Trump, by the way, we know that you threatened us with taxes. We're going to cut off your power. Now, that was just a little glimpse into what Doug Ford actually said. I want to take a look at a bit of a longer version.
Let's make no mistake about it. As I mentioned to the Prime Minister, the rest of the premiers, we need to be ready. We need to be ready to fight. This fight is coming 100% on January the 20th or January 21st. We don't know what extent this fight's going to go to, but we need to line up everything that we're going to tariff and make sure that the tariff, the money that's coming from these tariffs, don't go into a federal bank account sitting there somewhere. It needs to be immediately distributed right across the province equally, and we'll be able to support the companies, the factories, the workers for any issues that they're facing at the time. Chrystia Freeland's going to put a list together. We're going to put our list together, and I'm sure the other provinces will as well. But we will go to the full extent, depending on how far this goes. We will go to the extent of cutting off their energy, going down to Michigan, going down to New York State, and over to Wisconsin. I don't want this to happen, but my number one job is to protect Ontarians and Canadians as a whole, since we're the largest province. On the gear, they're going to enhance gear, get more border patrol, more sniffer dogs, if you want to call them that, patrol dogs. They're going to make sure they have more drones and more opportunities to cover the border. They have asked us, and I have agreed that we will support them again, temporarily, as long as it takes to get through this. But again, we emphasize the border is not our responsibility. Well, I think he's being a little more aggressive than he was in the past. And I say this respectfully to the president. He's a different type of cat, to say the least. Maybe I'm a different type of cat, but you know.
No, your brother was.
I've never seen, you know, not so much aggression, but so matter of fact. He didn't come across this way last time, and it's not helpful for both sides of the border. And you know, at the end of the day, the consumer gets hurt. Canadians get hurt, but I can assure you one thing: the Americans are going to feel the pain as well. And isn't that unfortunate?
Did you talk to the Prime Minister about his comments about the Americans not electing Kamala Harris and how that was evidence of women's rights being under attack? Do you think that those comments are helpful?
They aren't helpful at all, and yes, it was brought up in the, I'm not going to say who said what, but it was brought up a couple times in our meeting. It's not helpful at all. Donald Trump was elected democratically. If you like him or you don't like him, that's not our issue. We elect Canadians, and it was not helpful whatsoever. And I'm sure Prime Minister got the message.
So I'm going to be just vulnerable for a quick second here. This is me just playing devil's advocate and trying to check my own bias. This might be unpopular, but it is what it is. This is YouTube after all. MeTube, right? So if this were different circumstances, if Pierre was prime minister and this, you know, and everyone's like, okay, we're conservatives across the board. Every premier's conservatives and agrees with Pierre. And if Trump made the same threats to Pierre as prime minister, would you, the viewer, would I even have a different reaction than what I do right now, than what you may have right now? Would you be, hey, let's go after America. Like, let's stand up for Canada. Like, do you think Pierre would say, okay, well, we're not just going to let America steamroll us, so we're going to stand up for ourselves? Would you back Pierre's decision? I know these are hypotheticals, and in politics, playing hypotheticals gets you nowhere. We can play hypotheticals. The politicians will never, ever, ever entertain that. That's kind of the beauty about social media, is that we have the opportunity to do that. The answer, my answer at least, and let me know down in the comments what your guys' answer is, but my answer would be I would support Pierre's decision. And that's a clear bias. I can admit that. I don't support Trudeau's decision, mostly because it's Justin Trudeau. And I have to catch myself on this, because do I think that it's good for Canada to, you know, clap back at America? If they deserve it, yeah, I don't think we should be steamrolled. Am I not against it right now because it's Trudeau and, you know, Trudeau MPs? I know this guy's he's a conservative. I get it he's a conservative, but like, come on. He's the Trudeau conservative. You know what I'm saying? He's a Trudeau conservative for Ontario. Would I have a different reaction if it wasn't this premier doing it, if it was Pierre doing it? I know these are hypotheticals. They don't matter in politics, but this again is the beauty of social media, is we have the opportunity to ask these kind of tough questions and catch our own biases and say, at least for myself, yes, if it was Pierre clapping back at Trump, I would be like, hell yeah, Canada first, baby, Canada first. We're friends with America, but don't mess with us. Don't mess with us, right? You tap on the eagle too hard, it's going to topple. Don't mess with us. Right? Just ridiculous Canadian references. But because it's Trudeau managing it, it's like, oh, Trudeau's going to mess it up. Go Trump, go Trump. Trudeau's going to mess it up anyways, right? So that's just a little devil's advocate there. Again, that's not really getting anywhere other than just adding on more to the questions, more to the conversation, and playing these, you know, these hypothetical scenarios, which again doesn't ever happen in politics. Again, when Pierre gets asked, what are you going to do if this happens, if that happens? His answer is always, it hasn't happened. We don't know if it's going to happen. So that's ridiculous for me to answer, because when you answer hypotheticals in politics, you're just falling to someone's trap, right? But again, we're not politicians. We're just average Canadians wanting to have a conversation. And my conversational piece is that I absolutely do have a bias, and it's something that I'm working on. So I haven't exactly formulated my full thoughts on that. I don't want to speak prematurely on how exactly I feel. about these tariffs. But at least I can admit that if it was Pierre being threatened with the tariffs instead of Trudeau, I would probably be like, yeah, go Pierre, fight back. We love America, we love Americans, but that's not okay. So anyways, that's enough on that. Let's take a look here at a follow-up interview that 40 Boy did.
The energy threat that you mentioned last night,
Yes.
Does Ontario actually have the power to turn off the lights itself, or do you need to go to the federal government and they do it? How would that process actually work? Can Ontario do anything on its own?
Well, first of all, it's a last resort. We power 1.5 million homes, and if they put on tariffs, it's going to be unaffordable for Americans to buy electricity. Just like if they put tariffs on the 4.3 million barrels of oil that's Alberta shipping down to the U.S. If you put 25%, that increases every barrel of oil by, every gallon of gasoline by $1. So I don't think that President-elect Trump wants that to happen. What we're sending a message to the U.S., you come and attack Ontario, you attack livelihoods of people of Ontario and Canadians. We're going to use every tool in our toolbox to defend Ontarians and Canadians across the border. And let's hope that never comes to that point. Let's hope we can get through this trade deal. The problem is not with Canada. The problem is with China. And China shipping in parts to Mexico, Mexico slapping on Made in Mexico stickers, and shipping them up through the U.S. and Canada and taking American and Canadian jobs. That's the problem. And as I said yesterday, it's very, very clear. Mexico has a choice to stand with Beijing or stand with Washington.
Right. And so there you go. He's saying we don't want it to come to that. Then why put that out there in the first place? If you're looking for, I get what he's doing. He's trying to put a little bit of fear into Americans, saying, oh my God, our power is going to be cut off. And then for Americans socially to put pressure on Trump and, politicians in America saying, oh, turn the tariffs off. Don't threaten them with tariffs. We're not going to have power. What's going to happen? That's politics. It's greasy. It's turning people against other people. And usually it's within your own country. I didn't think that we'd be seeing this play out where it's turning Canadians against Americans. And that's why I want to have the open dialogue. On X, I do engage and entertain some of these conversations. But again, I think that this is just in poor taste all around. I don't think that Trump should have made this right. I think it should have been behind closed door conversations. But again, that's my opinion. I'd love to know yours. So that was one question for Ford, and we're going to take a look here at a follow-up question.
Other than energy, Premier, what are some other big ticket ways that Canada could retaliate against the United States?
Well, we're putting a list together along with the federal government, and all the premiers are putting a list together. We'll compile that list, have conversations with Minister of Finance, Chrystia Freeland, and we'll move forward. But we can't just roll over as we're being under attack and hurting our families and our jobs. We just want to send a message. When it comes to the U.S., I want to send them more electricity. I want to send them critical minerals. I want to make sure that we have fair trade going back and forth across the border. That's what I want to do, and support them any way we can. They aren't our enemies. They're our allies. And every single governor and senator and congresswoman and men that I speak to, they agree. I'll be speaking to both governors of Michigan and New York today, and I'm sure they share our same thoughts and values about giving them more electricity if they need it. That's the last thing we want to do. Would we do it? Let's wait and see.
That's the last thing we want to do, but hopefully it doesn't come to that. But it may come to that. Hopefully it doesn't, though. I don't know what to think. I don't know what to make of this yet. There's a lot of moving parts, and there's a lot happening all at once. But what I will do is pass the question off to you. How do you feel about this? Are you pro Ford's decisions to, threaten to cut off some power in America? Are you against it? Let me know your thoughts down below. Well, that seems to sum up a lot of the news stories. Now we're going to take a look at what's happening in question period in the House, because they are kind of calling for Chrystia Freeland to resign, which is something I'm okay with. She has done a horrible job of balancing the budget. In fact, Liberals seem to think that budgets balance themselves. So let's take a look at the tensions in question period in the House today. Oral questions. Questions. The Honourable Andrew Scheer
has lost control of spending and his cabinet, and the fiscal feud over the $40 billion guardrail is worse than we ever thought. New reports show that the Prime Minister is set to replace Canada's first female finance minister with his old boys network pal, carbon tax Carney. And Canadians are on the bus watching in terror as the Prime Minister is yanking her out of the driver's seat so that Carney can send us smashing through the guardrail and over the cliff. Does the finance minister still have her hands on the wheel, and will the deficit be below that $40 billion guardrail?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, I'm delighted that the first question of the Conservatives relates to the economy and the finance minister. Let's talk about the work she's been doing on behalf of Canadians. Yesterday,
bro, she's about to get fired.
50 basis point interest rate
right out the gate
by the Bank of Canada. That was the fifth time in a row, leading the entire G7, we've seen the interest rates come down from the Bank of Canada. On Saturday, we have a further great news for details for Canadians, which is a GST tax cut on basic essentials for every Canadian from coast to coast to coast. That's groceries, that's things that you buy for your kids for Christmas. That's great news for Canadians under the leadership of this finance minister.
Dude, Freeland's done. First female minister to get fired.
Even the bank admitted that they had to cut rates because the economy is performing so poorly under this NDP Liberal Prime Minister. And, you know, Canada's phantom finance minister has been pulling the strings for a while. Carbon tax Carney has been forcing radical new spending and forcing the finance minister to smash through a $40 billion guardrail. And now that Canadians are fed up and angry, the Prime Minister is going to blame her, dump her, and replace her with Carney. A classic example of an incompetent boss blaming subordinates. Does the finance minister not realize that she's about to join a long list of cabinet ministers that have had their careers and their reputations ruined by this prime minister?
There you go. Put some W's down in the chat.
An Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, I'm equally delighted that he's talking about the Bank of Canada, because what has the actual Bank of Canada governor said recently? He said, quote, CPI inflation has been about 2% since the summer, and we expect it to be close to target on average over the next couple of years. On inflation, what has Tiff Macklem said? Quote, we are no longer trying to get inflation down. Government spending is not pushing against us getting inflation down. We have brought it down. That's the handiwork of this finance minister and this government, generating economic growth and being prudent with fiscal management. That's about inflation being on target 11 straight months, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Regina Capel.
If he just read a little further, he'd read that it's not because of anything the government's been doing except causing our economy to slow down and underperform. That's why they've taken this step. But you know, a guardrail is something you're supposed to stay far away from. If you even brush up against it, it's a sign you're way off track. If you smash through it, you go flying off a cliff. Now, even Liberal MPs are terrified and are ringing the bell, trying to get off before they smash through the guardrail. One of them said, quote, I think that if we state that we have a $40 billion guardrail, we better stay within those numbers. And another is begging for a fiscally responsible framework. Will the Prime Minister allow a free vote, or will he force his Liberal MPs to stay on that bus as it goes up?
Andrew Scheer doing Andrew Scheer things.
Allow me to reference not just what the domestic Bank of Canada is talking about, but let's talk about what the IMF is stating. The IMF is projecting that Canada will have the strongest economic growth in the G7 on average in 2023 and 2024. Canada is expected to maintain its position as the country with the smallest deficit as a share of GDP among G7 countries, and still by far the lowest general government net debt as a share of GDP in the G7. What's up, Mr. Speaker? Canada's growth and leadership of the G7. That's what's up, and we're proud of it.
This fake feminist prime minister is determined to decimate Canadians' lives by destroying the economy, and he will throw anyone under the bus to do it, including his token finance female minister. Canadians know he's weak. They know he's lost control of his cabinet and his spending. The question is, will the first ever female finance minister have the courage to stand up to that fake feminist prime minister and stick to her promised $40 billion deficit?
The Honourable Minister for Indigenous Services.
Mr. Speaker, here's something tangible that the Leader of the Opposition could do. In the next election, he could run more women, and he could get more women in those seats. If he really wants to prove...
Bro, it's based off of merit.
In terms of standing up for women, let me just give you some stats, Mr. Speaker.
No. Drop an L. Drop an L. She sounds stupid.
9% of the women elected sit here in the Liberal benches. How many in the Conservative benches, Mr. Speaker? 6%.
No, it's based on merit. It's based on merit. It's based on merit, you bunch of horse crap.
Order.
You don't get a job because of your gender.
Order.
That's not how that works. We don't do diversity quotas.
I want to hear the question from the Honourable Member.
No wonder the Liberals suck.
The Honourable Member from Peterborough Kawartha.
Mr. Speaker, on the Conservative side of the House, women stand here because we're skilled and we're allowed to use our voice.
Woo! Mic drop! Yeah!
Mr. Speaker, Jody Wilson-Raybould is testament to this. That is a fake prime minister, but that is not the point. We're not here to talk about gender. We're here to talk about the economy, and it's destroyed under that fake feminist prime minister. So again, if she is not a token, will she stand up to him and say, no, I will abide by my $40 billion deficit guardrail to help this economy get back on track and save Canadians' lives?
There you go. Let's see what you got to say to that.
Know that all members are keen to return back to their constituencies for the Christmas break. But until that point, please, let us treat each other with respect. And that means letting...
Shut the hell up, Speaker. Let them talk.
Standing, or when someone...
Yeah, put some drop mics. Put some mics down in the chat.
The Honourable Minister for Crown Indigenous Services.
Well, Mr. Speaker, that woman might feel like a token, but I never do. I earned my seat in this House of Commons.
Yeah, based off a quota, it sounds like.
And you know why they don't like numbers, Mr. Speaker? Because the numbers don't speak in their favor. There are 30% of these seats taken by women, Mr. Speaker. Fully 17% of those are here over on this side. More than half of the women elected are Liberals, Mr. Speaker, and the other half are the rest of the parties combined. So they should do their job, Mr. Speaker, as parties and get more women to run.
Dude, it's based off of merit, not a quota. It's not hard to understand.
Order! The Honourable Member who is about to speak is deserving of having her voice heard. The Honourable Member for Calgary Nose Hill.
The Prime Minister, who has long self-described as a feminist, starting in July and through anonymous sources, have repeatedly maligned Canada's first female finance minister by undermining her competency. This week, reports have suggested that the finance minister has been at odds with the Prime Minister, who's been bullying her to blow back her already exorbitant $40 billion deficit. And now we've got female cabinet ministers defending the Prime Minister's decision to bring in an unelected man to replace her job. Why?
Good question.
Damn, man, Conservatives are
the Honourable Minister
not holding back today.
Inclusion.
Mr. Speaker, I always find it a bit rich when Conservatives talk about feminism, when their own leader will use hashtags on his YouTube videos to attract men who hate women. Mr. Speaker, it is anything but feminist when they bring forward backdoor legislation to ban abortion in this country, or when they all vote against increased funding to combat gender-based violence or to support survivors. Their leader doesn't care about women or equality. He only cares about himself. Shame on them, Mr. Speaker.
Order. The Honourable Member for Calgary Nose Hill.
Well, the fact remains, Mr. Speaker, that after months of reports that the Prime Minister wanted to turf Canada's first female finance minister, we find out today that he's in talks to put an unelected, conflict of interest-riddled man into the role.
Yeah.
The Globe and Mail story must have really stung for every single Liberal backbencher who has carried the water of this scandal-plagued Prime Minister for years. Why wouldn't they be getting this job? So my question is this. Does the Prime Minister really think that there is no one in the elected Liberal caucus who could be the finance minister? Anybody? No one?
Oh, that's gotta sting.
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the nature of the questions coming from the opposition today speak more about their opposition to feminism than it does our commitment to feminism. But that's typical, Mr. Speaker.
Ad hominems.
Speak louder than words in this case. When we brought forward things like the Canada Child Benefit or childcare, actual policies that help women, what did the Conservatives do? They voted against it. When we stand up for a woman's right to choose, what do the Conservatives do? They vote against it, bring in backdoor legislation to make it harder to access sexual health and reproductive rights in this country. When we work to make contraceptives free in this country, what do the Conservatives do? Stand in opposition. The real fake feminists are those folks on the other side of the Conservatives.
And that wraps up today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know down in the comments what your favorite parts of the video were. If you haven't yet already, I'd like to encourage you guys to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. It does really help with the channel's growth. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye for now.